Jake Martinez stood in the massive crystal chamber and felt very small. The walls rose high above him like frozen waterfalls made of pure light. Every surface sparkled with colors that had no names in any human language. Around him sat beings from across the galaxy, each one more strange and wonderful than the last. The trip to SciFiPrime had taken 6 months. Jake and his team had traveled farther from Earth than any human before them. They came with hope in their hearts and dreams of joining something bigger than themselves. They brought gifts from Earth and promises of friendship. They wanted to show the galaxy that humans were ready to be part of the great community of worlds. Commander. Jake Martinez was not a young man anymore. Gray touched his temples and lines marked his face from years of service. He had fought in Earth's last war and helped build the first ships that could reach the stars. Now he stood as humanity's voice. Before the greatest gathering of minds in the galaxy, behind him stood his team. Dr. Lisa Shun carried herself with quiet dignity. Her scientific mind had helped design the very ship that brought them here. Captain Ryan Brooks remained alert and ready. His military training showed in every movement. These 3 humans represented all of Earth's hopes and dreams. The chamber held representatives from dozens of worlds. Some looked almost human, but with skin that shifted like liquid metal. Others appeared as floating clouds of energy that spoke in musical tones. A few were so alien that Jake's mind struggled to understand what he was seeing. They had come from every corner of the galaxy to witness this moment. At the center of it all sat Princess Zaratheas of the Velcaran Empire. She was magnificent and terrible to behold. Her skin shimmered with a blue that seemed to hold starlight. 4 arms moved with grace that spoke of centuries of royal training. Jewels covered her form like captured galaxies. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of 1,000 worlds. Jake had prepared for this moment for years. He knew about the princess and her people. The Velcaran Empire had ruled this part of the galaxy for longer than human civilization had existed. They were builders of wonders and shapers of destiny. Their word could lift a species to greatness or condemn it to darkness. The princess studied the human delegation with eyes that held the wisdom of ages. She looked at their simple clothes and basic equipment. She saw their small ship parked outside, among vessels that dwarfed it like mountains beside pebbles. She watched their nervous movements and heard their quick breathing in the thin air. Jake stepped forward and began his speech. He spoke of Earth's blue skies and green forests. He told of humanity's journey from caves to stars. He offered trade agreements and cultural exchanges. He promised that humans would be loyal friends and trusted allies. His words came from the heart and carried the weight of billions of dreams. The princess listened without expression. When Jake finished, she rose from her throne like a tide of starlight. The chamber fell silent. Even the energy beings stopped their musical humming. Every eye turned to her as she prepared to speak. Her voice filled the chamber like thunder from a clear sky. She spoke of the Velcaran Empire's long history and great achievements. She told of species that had risen and fallen while her people watched from their crystal cities. She painted pictures with words of technologies that could reshape reality itself. Then she turned her attention to the humans. Her gaze fell on Jake like the weight of a star. She spoke of their primitive ships that crawled between worlds like insects. She mentioned their crude weapons that could barely scratch the surface of advanced shields. She laughed at their simple computers that thought in ones and zeros while galactic minds worked in dimensions. Beyond counting, the princess gestured to the human gifts with one of her 4 arms. She picked up a sample of Earth's finest steel and let it fall to the crystal floor with a dull clang. She examined their most advanced computer chip and shook her head in what might have been pity. She looked at their energy cells and made a sound that could have been laughter or disgust. Other council members began to murmur among themselves. Some made sounds that Jake suspected were alien laughter. A few showed expressions that needed no translation. The humans were being judged and found wanting. The princess continued her speech with growing confidence. She spoke of species that had brought wonders to the galaxy. She told of peoples who had mastered time and space before humanity learned to make fire. She described civilizations that had transcended physical form while humans still lived in mud huts. Jake felt his heart sink as the princess's words hit home. Every criticism was true. Humanity was young and weak compared to these ancient powers. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. Their knowledge was limited to one small world in an endless universe, but something else grew in Jake's chest as he listened. A fire that had driven humanity from their first steps out of Africa to their first steps on other worlds. The same spirit that had carried them through ice ages and wars and plagues. The determination that had lifted them from the ground to the stars. The princess's voice rose to fill every corner of the chamber. She spoke her final judgment with the authority of ages. Humanity was too primitive to join the galactic community. They were too barbaric to be trusted with advanced technology. They were too limited to understand the responsibilities that came with cosmic citizenship. She suggested that perhaps in a few thousand years, when humans had evolved beyond their savage nature, the galaxy might consider them again. Maybe their distant descendants would be worthy of attention. But for now, they should return to their little blue world and content themselves with their small place in the universe. The rejection was complete and total. Not a single voice rose in humanity's defense. The council had spoken with one voice, and that voice said no. Jake felt the weight of failure settle on his shoulders. He had carried the hopes of his entire species to this moment, and he had failed them all. The dreams of trade and friendship lay shattered on the crystal floor like broken glass. But Jake Martinez was not a man who gave up easily. He gathered his materials with steady hands. He helped his team collect their rejected gifts. He stood straight and tall as he prepared to leave this place of wonders and return to Earth with nothing but disappointment. The princess called out one final insult as the humans walked toward the exit. She told them to send her regards to their little blue world. She suggested that maybe their grandchildren would be more interesting than they were. Jake stopped at the threshold and turned back one last time. He looked at the princess with eyes that held no anger, only a quiet determination that she did not recognize. He spoke his final words to the council in a voice that carried across the chamber like a promise. He thanked them for their time and told them that humanity would not forget this meeting. Then he walked away from the greatest gathering of minds in the galaxy, carrying with him the memory of their laughter and the seed of something that would change the universe forever. The journey back to Earth stretched ahead like a wound that would not heal. Jake Martinez sat in his captain's chair aboard the human vessel Horizon and stared at the stars that no longer seemed welcoming. 6 months of travel lay between them and home, and every day would be a reminder of their failure. Dr. Lisa Chun worked in her laboratory like a woman possessed. She had not spoken much since leaving SciFiPrime, but her hands never stopped moving. She took apart every scanner they had used during their visit to the alien world. She studied every reading they had taken of the princess's technology. She examined each detail of the crystal chamber where their dreams had died. Captain Ryan Brooks spent his time reviewing security footage from their meeting with the Galactic Council. He watched the alien delegates laugh at human gifts over and over. Again, he studied their expressions when the princes spoke of human weakness. He memorized the way they looked at humans like amusing pets who had learned a simple trick. Jake found himself thinking about the princess's words every day. She had called humans primitive and barbaric. She had suggested they were not ready for the responsibilities of cosmic citizenship. She had laughed at their technology and dismissed their dreams. But something about her mockery had planted a seed in Jake's mind that grew stronger each day. The ship's communication array buzzed with messages from Earth. Government officials wanted reports on their mission. Military leaders asked about alien weapons and defenses. Scientists begged for any scrap of information about galactic technology. Jake answered them all with the same message. Humanity needed to change everything. Dr. Shun made the first breakthrough 3 weeks into their journey home. She called Jake to her laboratory with excitement in her voice that he had not heard since before their meeting with the council. She showed him readings from the alien gravity manipulation systems they had observed. The princess's people used exotic matter to bend space around their ships. They created fields of energy that pushed against the fabric of reality itself. It was elegant and beautiful and completely beyond human understanding. But Dr. Chun had found something else in the data that made her eyes shine with possibility. She explained to Jake that the aliens thought about gravity in only one way. They had perfected their method over thousands of years and never considered alternatives. But humans had always been good at finding different paths to the same destination. They did not need to copy alien technology if they could create their own. Dr. Chun showed Jake her calculations for quantum field manipulation. Instead of using exotic matter to bend space, humans could punch holes through dimensions using controlled explosions of energy. It was crude and violent and completely human. It was also potentially twice as fast as anything the aliens had ever built. Captain Brooks joined them in the laboratory and added his own observations. He had studied the alien weapons and defenses during their visit. The princess's people used energy shields that could stop plasma weapons and particle beams. They had perfected these defenses over centuries of warfare with similar technologies, but Brooks pointed out something that made Jake's heart race with possibility. The alien shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not physical projectiles. They had never encountered the kind of kinetic weapons that humans specialized in. Their elegant defenses might be useless against a simple chunk of metal moving at high speed. Jake began to see the shape of something forming in his mind. The aliens had called humans primitive, but what if that was actually an advantage? What if human crudeness could overcome alien sophistication? What if the very thing that made them seem barbaric could become their greatest strength? He started making calls to Earth using the ship's quantum communication system. He spoke to defense contractors about new weapon designs. He talked to technology companies about research partnerships. He contacted universities about accelerated development programs. Every conversation carried the same message: humanity needed to advance, and they needed to do it fast. The response from Earth surprised Jake with its intensity. News of the Galactic Council's rejection had spread across the planet like wildfire. Every human who heard the story felt personally insulted. Scientists worked longer hours in their laboratories. Engineers pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Inventors dreamed of technologies that could prove the aliens wrong. Dr. Chin spent her days designing new propulsion systems that worked on principles no alien had ever considered. She calculated the energy requirements for quantum tunneling through dimensional barriers. She sketched plans for ships that could travel faster than light using methods that would seem impossible to the Galactic Council. Captain Brooks worked on weapon designs that turned human limitations into advantages. He planned kinetic projectiles that could punch through energy shields like paper. He designed delivery systems that could strike targets before alien sensors could detect them. He imagined battles where human crudeness would triumph over alien elegance. Jake coordinated everything from his captain's chair. He spoke to world leaders about funding for rapid development programs. He negotiated with corporations about sharing research data. He convinced military commanders to take risks on untested technologies. He became the voice of human determination. In the face of alien dismissal, the princess's mockery had done something she never intended. It had united humanity behind a single goal. Every nation and corporation and research facility on Earth began working toward the same dream. They would prove that humans deserved a place among the stars, not by copying alien methods, but by creating their own path to greatness. Messages flowed back and forth between the horizon and Earth every day. Scientists shared breakthrough discoveries. Engineers reported successful tests of impossible technologies. Inventors announced the creation of devices that should not have worked but somehow did. The rejection that had seemed like an ending was becoming a beginning. Jake found himself smiling for the first time since leaving SciFiPrime. He had walked away from the Galactic Council carrying nothing but humiliation and failure, but somewhere in the depths of space, as Earth grew larger in their viewports, He realized that the princess had given them something more valuable than acceptance. She had given them motivation. She had provided them with a challenge that would drive human innovation beyond anything they had ever achieved. She had created an enemy that would unite his species in purpose and determination. She had planted the seeds of her own defeat in the soil of human stubbornness. The horizon approached Earth's solar system after 6 months of travel, but Jake knew they were not returning as the same people who had left. They carried with them the spark of something that would change the galaxy forever. The princes had mocked them and sent them away, but they were coming home with fire in their hearts and revolution in their minds. Earth appeared in their viewports like a blue jewel against the darkness of space. Jake looked at his homeworld and saw not a primitive planet at the edge of galactic civilization, but the birthplace of something that would shake the foundations of the universe. The aliens had rejected humanity, but humanity was about to reject the limitations that had been placed upon them. The real journey was just beginning. 5 years passed like a storm across the surface of human civilization. Jake Martinez watched from his office window as Earth transformed itself into something that would have been impossible to imagine before their journey to HFY. The planet buzzed with activity that never stopped, day or night, as humanity raced toward a future that the aliens had declared impossible. The Human Advancement Initiative had grown from Jake's simple idea into a global force that touched every aspect of human life. Research facilities sprouted like flowers after rain in every major city. Universities opened new departments dedicated to impossible technologies. Corporations poured billions into projects that promised to rewrite the laws of physics. Dr. Lisa Shan had become the most famous scientist on Earth. Her quantum kinetic drive project consumed vast underground laboratories beneath the Rocky Mountains. She worked with teams of physicists who thought in ways that no alien species had ever considered. They did not try to fold space or bend reality like the princess's people. Instead, they planned to punch holes through the fabric of existence itself. The first test of Dr. Chun's drive system had been conducted in secret. 3 years after their return from HFY, the unmanned probe had vanished from Earth's solar system in a flash of light that could be seen from Mars. 12 hours later, it appeared in the Alpha Centauri system. Having traveled faster than any alien ship in galactic history, the second test had been even more successful. A small crewed vessel had made the journey to Proxima Centauri and back in less than a week. The crew reported that the quantum tunneling effect felt like being turned inside out and rebuilt from memory, but they had suffered no permanent damage. Humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel using methods that would seem like magic. To the Galactic Council. Captain Ryan Brooks had been promoted to general and put in charge of humanity's new weapons development program. His teams worked in facilities that stretched deep into the Earth's crust, designing instruments of war that operated on principles no alien had ever encountered. They created projectiles that could disrupt matter at the molecular level. They built delivery systems that could strike targets across star systems. The breakthrough that changed everything came from an unexpected source. Colonel Amy Watson, a former fighter pilot turned weapons engineer, had been working on matter disruption technology for 2 years. She discovered that human weapons did not need to be elegant or sophisticated to be effective. They only needed to work in ways that alien defenses could not anticipate. Her matter disruptor cannons operated on principles that violated every rule of civilized warfare as understood by the galactic community. They did not use energy beams or particle streams. Instead, they fired projectiles that rearranged atomic structures on impact. Alien energy shields, designed to deflect plasma weapons, offered no protection against devices that simply changed the nature of matter itself. Engineer Marcus Rodriguez had revolutionized human manufacturing with his self-replicating nanotechnology. Systems. His tiny machines could build copies of themselves using raw materials found on any world. Within months of landing on a new planet, they could construct entire cities and industrial complexes without human supervision. The aliens had always built their colonies slowly, taking centuries to terraform worlds and establish permanent settlements. Their methods were careful and elegant and completely inefficient by human standards. Marcus's nanobots could accomplish in weeks what alien engineers needed decades to achieve. The first human colony outside Earth's solar system had been established. On a world orbiting Volf 359, the colonists had arrived to find a barren rock with no atmosphere and no water. 6 months later, they sent back images of a thriving city surrounded by green fields and artificial lakes. The planet's atmosphere had been modified to support human life, and vast factories produced ships and weapons for the growing human fleet. More colonies followed in rapid succession. Each new world became a research station where human scientists pushed the boundaries of what was possible. They developed technologies that the aliens had never imagined because they thought in ways that no other species had ever considered. The breakthrough that shocked even Jake came from an unexpected source. Emma Collins was a 17-year-old student working on her high school science project when she accidentally discovered stable wormhole generation. She had been trying to build a better communication system using quantum processors and household materials when she opened a portal to a moon orbiting Jupiter. Emma's discovery led to the development of instantaneous travel across any distance. Human ships could now appear anywhere in the galaxy without crossing the space between departure and arrival points. The aliens' careful navigation methods and established trade routes became obsolete overnight. Within 5 years of their rejection by the Galactic Council, humanity had spread across dozens of star systems. Their colonies appeared on worlds that had never seen intelligent life. Their ships traveled using methods that violated every principle of galactic physics. Their weapons could destroy targets that should have been invulnerable to any attack. Jake stood in his office and looked at displays showing human expansion across the galaxy. Red dots marked new colonies that had been established in the past month. Blue lines showed travel routes through wormhole networks that connected distant worlds instantly. Green markers indicated research stations where human scientists continued to push the boundaries of impossible technologies. The transformation had not been without cost. Earth's environment had been stressed by the rapid industrialization needed to support galactic expansion. Many traditional ways of life had been abandoned as humanity focused everything on technological advancement. But Jake knew that the price had been worth paying. Reports came in daily from human colonies about contact with alien civilizations. The galaxy was beginning to notice that something new had appeared among the stars. Trade routes were being disrupted by human expansion. Ancient boundaries were being crossed by species that had not existed as a galactic power 5 years earlier. Most importantly, Jake received regular intelligence reports about the princess's reaction to human activities. Princess Zarathes had initially dismissed the rumors about human expansion as impossible exaggerations, but the evidence was becoming too strong to ignore. The species she had mocked as primitive was demonstrating technologies that surpassed anything in her empire. Jake thought about the princess's words every day as he watched humanity transform itself into something that would have been unrecognizable to the beings who had rejected them. She had called them barbaric and primitive. She had suggested they were not ready for the responsibilities of cosmic citizenship. She had laughed at their crude technology and simple understanding of the universe, but she had made one critical error in her judgment. She had assumed that human crudeness was a weakness rather than a strength. She had believed that sophistication was always superior to simplicity. She had failed to understand that sometimes the most effective solution was also the most direct. 1. The princes had sent them away to their little blue world with mockery and dismissal. But they had not stayed there. They had used her rejection as fuel for the greatest expansion in human history. They had proven that being primitive did not mean being inferior. They had shown that barbarism could be more effective than civilization. Jake smiled as he read the latest reports from the frontier. Humanity was no longer asking for permission to join the galactic community. They were creating their own community and inviting others to join them. The princes had mocked them and walked away, but now she would have to live with the consequences of her arrogance forever. Princess Zarathis sat in her crystal throne room and tried to ignore the reports that kept arriving from across her empire. The words on the data tablets seemed impossible, but they came from trusted sources who had never lied to her before. The humans were expanding across the galaxy at a speed that defied every law of physics she understood. The first reports had been easy to dismiss. Minor border worlds claiming to have seen strange ships that moved faster than light should allow. Trade captains telling stories about colonies that appeared overnight on barren worlds. Merchants speaking of technologies that seemed to violate the fundamental rules of the universe. Princess Zarathis had ordered her intelligence officers to investigate these claims. Surely the primitive species she had rejected 5 years ago could not have achieved anything significant in such a short time. The reports had to be exaggerated or completely false. Perhaps other alien species were testing new technologies and humans were taking credit for achievements that were not their own, but the evidence kept growing stronger with each passing month. Her spies brought back recordings of human ships that appeared and disappeared without crossing the space between locations. They showed her images of human colonies that had been built in weeks rather than centuries. They presented analysis of human weapons that operated on principles no civilized species had ever conceived. The princess called a meeting of her highest advisors in the great council chamber of her palace. These were beings who had served her family for generations, whose wisdom had guided the Velkaran Empire through countless challenges. They had never failed to provide her with answers to the most difficult questions. High Advisor Kethmer spoke first, his ancient voice carrying the weight of 1,000 years of experience. He had studied the human expansion with the analytical mind that had made him famous across the galaxy. His conclusions were disturbing in ways that made the princess's forearms tremble with uncertainty. The humans were not copying alien technologies as most species did when they first reached the stars. Instead, they were creating completely new approaches to problems that had been solved the same way for millions of years. They did not ask how to improve existing methods. They asked why those methods were necessary at all. Intelligence Director Sothlin presented her findings about human military capabilities. The princess listened with growing horror as the report described weapons that could destroy targets, protected by the most advanced shields in the galaxy. Human projectiles did not try to overwhelm alien defenses. They simply ignored them by operating on principles that made traditional protection useless. The most disturbing news came from trade. Minister Vexton, whose networks of contacts stretched across every major trade route in the galaxy. He reported that several alien species had begun abandoning their traditional partnerships to pursue agreements with humanity. The humans were offering technologies that seemed miraculous even to civilizations that had mastered star travel for millennia. Princess Zarathis felt something cold settle in her chest as she listened to these reports. The species she had dismissed as primitive was demonstrating capabilities that surpassed anything in her empire. They were not just joining the galactic community. They were reshaping it according to their own vision. The princess demanded to know how this was possible. Her advisors had spent months trying to answer that question, and their conclusions challenged everything she believed about the nature of intelligence and civilization. The humans did not think like other species. They did not accept limitations that seemed obvious to everyone else. Where alien civilizations perfected existing technologies over thousands of years, humans completely reimagined the fundamental principles. They did not try to build better versions of devices that already existed. They created entirely new categories of technology that no one had ever imagined before. High Advisor Kethmer explained that human crudeness was actually a form of genius that other species had never developed. They were not bound by the elegant solutions that had worked for millions of years. They were willing to use methods that seemed barbaric, but achieved results that sophisticated approaches could not match. The princes watched recordings of human cities rising from dead worlds in a matter of weeks. She saw their ships appearing in star systems without traveling through the space between them. She observed their weapons destroying targets that should have been protected by impenetrable defenses. Every image mocked the primitive label she had applied to them. Her advisors showed her intelligence, reports about human research stations scattered across dozens of worlds. Each facility was pushing the boundaries of what was possible in different directions. They were not just advancing their technology. They were expanding the definition of what technology could be. The most humiliating discovery came when Intelligence Director Soflin presented a collection of messages that had been sent to the princess's court over the past 5 years. Every message was from Commander Jake Martinez, the human she had publicly mocked at the Galactic Council. The messages were polite and respectful, requesting meetings to discuss trade agreements and cultural exchanges. They offered to share advanced technologies with the Velkaran Empire. They proposed joint research projects that could benefit both species. They even included detailed plans for technologies that seemed impossible but were apparently working. In human space, Princess Zarathis realized with growing horror that every message had been ignored by her court. Her staff had dismissed them as communications from a primitive species that had nothing worthwhile to offer. They had not even bothered to translate most of them into her native language. The princess read through the messages with mounting shock. The humans had been trying to establish friendly relations for years, while she had been pretending they did not exist. They had offered partnership, while she had maintained the arrogant silence that had driven them to surpass her empire. The final message had arrived just days before, but it was different from all the others. Commander Martinez no longer requested meetings or offered gifts. Instead, he simply informed the princess that humanity was establishing a new galactic alliance and invited her to consider joining it on equal terms. The implications of that message struck the princess like a physical blow. The humans were no longer asking for permission to join the galactic community. They were creating their own community and graciously allowing others to participate. The power dynamic had completely reversed while she had been ignoring their existence. Princess Zarathis dismissed her advisors and sat alone in her throne room. Staring at the messages that documented her greatest failure, she had mocked the humans and sent them away, expecting them to return to their primitive world and accept their place as a minor species on the edge of galactic civilization. Instead, her rejection had forged them into something that threatened to make her own empire obsolete. They had used her mockery as motivation to achieve things that should have been impossible. They had transformed her dismissal into the driving force behind their rise to dominance. The princess finally understood the magnitude of her mistake. She had not just insulted a primitive species. She had created a rival that had surpassed her in every way that mattered. Her arrogance had given birth to the very force that would eventually humble her empire. The humans had proven that being primitive was not the same as being inferior. They had shown that sophistication could be a weakness rather than a strength. They had demonstrated that sometimes the most effective approach was also the most direct one. Princess Zarathis realized that she would have to swallow her pride and request a meeting with the beings she had once dismissed as unworthy of her attention. The thought filled her with shame, but she knew that the alternative was watching her empire fade into irrelevance while humanity shaped the future of the galaxy. The royal flagship of the Velkaran Empire approached the human world of New Geneva like a relic from an ancient age. Princess Zarathis stood at the observation deck and watched human vessels escort her through the star system, their sleek designs making her own ship look clumsy and outdated. The technology gap that had once favored her people had reversed so completely that she felt like a primitive visiting an advanced civilization. New Geneva hung before them like a jewel crafted by gods. The planet had been a dead rock just 5 years ago, but human terraforming technology had transformed it into a garden world that surpassed anything in her empire. Cities stretched across continents in patterns that seemed to grow naturally from the landscape. Transportation networks moved through dimensional folds that bent space around them. The very air shimmered with energy that spoke of technologies beyond her understanding. Princess Zarathis had spent weeks preparing for this meeting. She had rehearsed speeches that tried to explain away her earlier rejection of humanity. She had practiced expressions of regret that might soften the humiliation she had inflicted upon their delegation. She had searched for words that could repair the damage her arrogance had caused, but as her ship descended toward the human capital, she realized that no amount of preparation could change what had happened. She had mocked Commander Jake Martinez and his people when they came seeking friendship. She had dismissed their gifts and laughed at their technology. She had sent them away with words designed to crush their spirits and keep them in their place. Instead, her cruelty had forged them into something that now dominated the galaxy. Every human achievement was a monument to her failure. Every technological breakthrough was proof that her judgment had been catastrophically wrong. Every new colony they established was another step away from the primitive species she had believed them to be. The landing platform where her ship touched down was larger than most cities in her empire. Human workers moved with efficiency that spoke of perfect coordination between organic minds and artificial intelligence. Robots that seemed more alive than mechanical assisted with tasks that required both strength and delicate precision. The very ground beneath her feet hummed with energy that suggested technologies she could not begin to comprehend. Commander Jake Martinez waited for her at the entrance to the diplomatic complex. 5 years had added more gray to his hair and deeper lines to his face, but his eyes held the same quiet determination she remembered from their first meeting. He wore simple clothes that marked him as a man who had no need to impress others with displays of wealth or power. Behind him stood the team she remembered from SciFiPrime. Dr. Lisa Chun had become one of the most famous scientists in the galaxy. Her quantum drive technology revolutionizing space travel for every species that could afford it. Captain Ryan Brooks wore the uniform of a general, his military innovations having transformed human defense capabilities beyond recognition. They looked at her with expressions that held no anger, only a professional courtesy that somehow felt worse than hatred. Princess Zarathis walked toward them with steps that felt heavier with each movement. Her forearms trembled slightly as she approached the beings she had once dismissed as unworthy of her attention. The weight of her mistakes pressed down on her like the gravity of a dying star. Jake Martinez greeted her with the same polite respect he had shown 5 years ago, when she had humiliated him before the Galactic Council. He spoke of the honor of her visit and the hope for productive discussions between their peoples. His words were courteous and professional, but they carried an undertone that reminded her of the power dynamic that had completely reversed. The conference room where they met overlooked a cityscape that defied every principle of alien architecture. She understood. Buildings seemed to grow from the ground like living things, their surfaces shifting and adapting to changing conditions. Transportation systems moved through space that folded around them, carrying passengers across vast distances. In moments, technology and nature blended together in ways that created beauty without sacrificing functionality. Princess Zarathis tried to begin with prepared speeches about misunderstandings and communication errors. She suggested that perhaps there had been problems with translation during their first meeting. She hinted that her words might have been taken out of context or misinterpreted by cultural differences. Jake Martinez listened to her attempts at explanation with the patience of a man who had heard similar excuses before. When she finished, he responded with quiet words that cut through her diplomatic language like a blade through silk. He reminded her of exactly what she had said 5 years ago. Quoting her mockery with perfect accuracy, she had called humans primitive and barbaric. She had laughed at their technology and dismissed their dreams. She had suggested they were not ready for the responsibilities of cosmic citizenship. She had told them to return to their little blue world and wait a few thousand years before trying again. The princess felt her remaining dignity crumble as Jake repeated her own words back to her. Every insult she had delivered was thrown back in her face with surgical precision. Every moment of cruelty was laid bare for examination. She had no defense because everything he said was absolutely true. Jake explained that humanity had received her message clearly. They understood that they were not welcome in the galactic community as it existed. So they had created their own community based on principles that valued innovation over tradition, results over elegance, and progress over stability. Dr. Shun presented data about human technological achievements that made the princes feel physically sick. Their quantum drive systems were twice as fast as anything her people had ever built. Their matter disruption weapons could destroy targets that had been considered invulnerable for millions of years. Their terraforming technology could transform dead worlds into garden paradises in a fraction of the time traditional methods required. General Brooks showed her military analyses that demonstrated how completely human capabilities had surpassed those of established galactic powers. Their weapons operated on principles that made traditional defenses useless. Their ships could appear anywhere without warning. Their strategies were based on approaches that no alien military had ever encountered. The most devastating blow came when Jake presented her with a list of alien species that had requested membership in the Human Alliance. Civilizations that had been part of the galactic community for millennia were abandoning their traditional loyalties to pursue partnerships with humanity. The old order was crumbling as beings across the galaxy recognized which direction the future was moving. Princess Zarathis finally asked the question that had been burning in her chest since the meeting began. She wanted to know what humans intended to do with the power they had accumulated. She feared that they might seek revenge against those who had rejected them. Jake Martinez smiled for the first time during their conversation, and his expression held no malice or cruelty. He explained that humans wanted the same thing they had always wanted: cooperation, trade, and peaceful coexistence among all intelligent species. The difference was that now they were offering partnership between equals rather than begging for acceptance from superiors. The princess realized that humanity had achieved something her people had never managed. They had gained dominance without becoming dominant. They had surpassed their critics without seeking to crush them. They had proven their worth without needing to diminish others. As the meeting concluded, Princess Zarathis understood that she was witnessing the end of one age and the beginning of another. The galaxy would never again be the same place it had been when she mocked a delegation of primitive humans. Her arrogance had created the very force that would reshape the universe according to human values. Jake Martinez escorted her back to her ship with the same courtesy he had shown throughout their meeting. As her vessel prepared to depart New Geneva, the princess looked back at the world that represented everything her rejection had made possible. She had mocked the humans and walked away in triumph. But now she was walking away in defeat. The final irony was that humanity had given her exactly what she deserved: the chance to regret her actions forever. They had not sought revenge or demanded apologies. Instead, they had simply succeeded so completely that her mockery had become the foundation of their greatest triumph. Princess Zarathis returned to her empire knowing that she had witnessed the future of galactic civilization. The humans had proven that being primitive was not the same as being inferior. They had shown that sometimes the greatest gift you could give someone was the motivation to prove you wrong.